All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Living the Dream podcast. Today on the show, we have Colleen Johnson, who is the author of Live Your Freedom Now and a life and leadership coach. Megan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
And we are happy to have you. We like to jump right in. So if you could start with just telling us a little bit more about yourself and what you like to do for fun, that'd be great.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm Megan and I'm a life and leadership coach. I really love working with creative folks, neurodivergent folks, entrepreneurs, artists, all the things. And for fun, what I love to do is I really love to go hiking. So my husband and I recently moved to Ventura, California from the Midwest. And so I'm
That's a
a
big
little
move.
bit. It is a big move. It was yeah, we did the drive all the way through the night, so it was quite a trek.
Yeah,
Um but I'm really enjoying getting to know the area and hiking on a lot more um of the kind of mountainous landscapes and such. So,
I gotcha. How recent was the move?
in November. So, about six months now,
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
5.5, 6 months. Well, there we go.
Mhm.
There we go. And life and leadership coach. Tell us a little bit about how you got into that. Like, have you been doing that for the past 10 years? Did you get into it a little bit after working in corporate yourself? Like, how did that kind of come to fruition?
Yeah, so I have been doing coaching for about 4 years. Prior to that, I was working as a graphic designer and marketer. So that's kind of where I started in things. And before that as well, I was a photographer doing lots of entrepreneurial things, but also working in the workforce. I have found that my system and like the way my brain works, I don't love corporate. 9 to 5, just really I struggle with. So yeah, I started out with a photography business, went to school for graphic design, worked in graphic design and marketing for once I added it together, it was about 8 years, and switched over into life coaching after I started a marketing agency. And we were very successful at first, but it also brought to light a lot of things in my own kind of inner landscape that needed readjusting. There was a lot of manipulation that I had happened to me, and recognized a lot of codependent patterns for myself. Hired a coach that inspired me to then also begin my journey as a coach, and then now I'm also in school to become a therapist. So kind of shifted from the marketing end of things and now doing the inner work with folks.
I gotcha. I gotcha. That is very
Yeah.
interesting. Tell us a bit more about your motivation. I feel like you kind of hinted at it there, but what really gets you up and keeps you going every day?
Yeah. Um hmm. And I apologize, there's a little bit of noise outside, so hopefully that doesn't come into the recording. Let me know if
Totally
I
fine. All good.
got some neighbors doing some yard work.
We can hear it a little bit, but this is how natural conversations go, so we're just gonna
All
flow
right.
with it.
Cool. Sounds good. Um, yeah, so my motivation is really, I just find people's inner worlds really fascinating. And the way that our psyche works. And the more that I learn and the more that I uncover, the more fascinated I am. Especially, so I grew up in a very conservative, high control religion as well. And that facilitated a lot of my own people pleasing habits and codependence. And I think as I unraveled that for myself as well, and how my brain worked and the what that cultivated in my life, um, it just really made me aware of how many things are in our world that are kind of just under the surface, and we don't realize what's driving us, we don't realize what's motivating us. And when we can actually start to peel back those layers, we can start to make more conscious choices. And so I think that's honestly what motivates me, is just the curiosity of like what is motivating other people. Um yeah does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it does a lot. And so after you did the inner work and you found how much it healed you, you start getting is that when you started getting more intrigued with other people's kind of how they work on the inside? And as you got more intrigued and you found out more, it just led to more fascination? Is that
Yes. Yeah. I think I've always had a little bit of an inclination
okay?
and curiosity towards, how people's brains works. I am neurodivergent, and so I think I've always been witnessing other folks and how their brains work, because I'm also trying to notice for myself the best way to show up in the world. Not always a supportive way to engage in the world, but I think that internal fascination started very young, and then now it's just kind of been brought to the forefront again in a more conscious way.
Gotcha, gotcha. Talk to us about what neurodivergent means.
Yeah, so neurodivergence as a whole, like we all have different brain structures and we're all, different from one another in
I
how
see,
our
I see.
neurological wiring is. To be a neurodivergent individual typically means you associate or have a diagnosis of some type of difference like ADHD, dyscalculia, dyslexia, CPTSD can sometimes fall under that, autism. So there's a lot of different terms, but to be a neurodivergent person tends to mean you fall under one of those categories.
I gotcha. I gotcha. Appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Cleared it up, cleared it up. Well, cool. Tell us about the inner work, what that process was like for you, kind of what's it like diving into it with other people because it's a very especially if you're just starting to hear about it and even sometimes if you're in the middle of it, it can be very intangible, like hard to kind of put your finger on when you talk about the inner work. So, kind of talk to us about
Yeah. Yeah. Even the term like inner work or, doing the work,
yeah,
it's very, yeah, like you said, intangible. So for me, that process really began, like I said, working with my own coach. And it started as just noticing the voices within my own system. So noticing a lot of, I now call them dominant dogma in my like brand language, but it's really just noticing the stories that we tell ourselves and that we're told, noticing a lot of the shoulds. So one of the things for me was just noticing the shoulds, the have tos, the what are often called limiting beliefs,
yeah,
and starting from that place to recognize the conditioning um, that I grew up with, and then being able to consciously choose them instead of having them placed on me. That to me is really the foundation, I think, of inner work, because then once you're able to notice those things, it opens up so much possibility, um and it allows once you notice where the different narratives are coming from, you can actually start to heal those different spaces that perhaps a narrative wasn't supportive, perhaps a specific belief or limiting belief is connected to a current wound or a childhood wound, and so you can actually start to heal those things. And so for me it was kind of just working through different strands of that. When I work with people currently, so at this point, I'm not a therapist, I am a coach. And so, what I love to help people do is to recognize those things. And we really work on strategies to help them move forward versus healing the past. I leave that to the therapist as far as healing the past. But we create those strategies to help them work towards their dreams and, yeah, just handing back those old stories.
I got you. I got you. And so that awareness, once you get that awareness of your conditioning, of your limiting beliefs, was there another word you used, or did that
Dominant dogma. Is
dominant
that the
dominant?
one? Yeah. So, because the term dogma is really when a phrase or a story becomes something you don't question anymore. Like a dogma is something you don't question at all costs, right? And so to me, culturally, we have a lot of dominant narratives, dominant dogmas that we're not supposed to question. And so by labeling it that, to me, it's almost an invitation to be like, wait a second, if it's called a dogma, we're definitely going to question it.
Yeah,
Because I feel like we should be allowed to question everything, because in that questioning we can actually make that conscious choice of what's supportive for our unique journeys.
yeah, I like that. Tell us a little bit. So once you get that awareness, what's that conscious choice like? Because I feel like it's very difficult once you're aware. You'll have these conflicting or competing emotions and thoughts in your head. So
Mm.
tell us about the process of making that choice and then continuing to make that choice. Um, you know, over the time it takes to like really address these, beliefs, dogmas, conditioning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so what I'm hearing from you is um, talking about the process of, so once you're aware of the narrative, how to actually make the choice, correct?
Yeah, just the consistency of making a a different choice than the conditioning, limiting beliefs, and dogma that have like become so entrenched in us. Because at a certain point,
Mm,
I feel like at the beginning of the awareness, there's going to be conflict. It's like I could do this
mhm,
or I could do this, and then
mhm.
consistently choosing the version of you that you
The
want to
new
be,
path.
the story
Yeah.
that you want to adopt, can be difficult for some people. So, kind of talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's difficult for all of us. It shows up in different ways. So for me, the language that I use for that is congruence. So integrity and congruence. It's that's one of the so I have 5 practices of freedom within my kind of framework, if you want to like call it that. And one of those is integrity and congruence. And for me, that's really that middle space where you actually start to evaluate, okay, first of all, what's in integrity? And so integrity to me is establishing your values. And so noticing, okay, these were maybe my past values. What are my new values that I want to hold to? And recognize, like holding that as like, okay, when I live from these new values, that's living with integrity for me. And then on the congruence side of things, that's like what I'm feeling. So what's just true for me. So for example, this week for me, for some reason or another, has felt overwhelming. I don't know why. There's probably a lot of underlying reasons. I go to therapy for that. I have my own coach for that. But like, it's just felt overwhelming. And that's just true. And I don't need to necessarily question it. I don't need to unpack it. I can, but that's just what's true. That's congruent. And so on this journey, as we're evaluating the narratives, I find it really important to hold these two things of like, okay, what's true for me right now? How can I honor that and hold that and be with that? And also, what is living with integrity? So, knowing that I'm overwhelmed, okay, if my value is to be loyal, if my value is to hmm, be honest, okay, then I'm going to show up on this podcast and be loyal to my commitments and be honest about the fact that I am overwhelmed. So then I'm able to kind of recognize how I want to show up in the world and choose that. Or I can consciously choose to bypass or overlook the overwhelm so that I can also live with my values. And we do that a lot in our world. We like hold maybe a value of productivity in kind of the Western culture, and we often overlook the congruence part of things. And that's okay, like that's a choice. um and similarly, we might live where we're always living from the congruent. So I'm sad, I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, and we might choose things just living from that place, and then we bypass the values. And so for me, this experience of noticing the narratives and noticing the things that, like the dominant dogmas and the stories that are going through my head, it really comes down to holding these two things and playing with them. Like, do I want to live, how can I live with integrity and congruence? Can I hold those things together? Or is this a case where I want to, choose one or the other? But having that, it allows me, I think, to feel more control when it comes to my choices. Um, does that answer your question? I feel like that was a very complex answer to your question.
No, no, I think it does answer specifically the congruence part, because I feel
Yeah.
like that's where I feel like the integrity is kind of like, okay, you establish some values and you kind of have some solid decision making criteria. But then you
Mm-hmm.
have to hold that congruence up, because when it comes to the consistent nature of things, yes, your values are consistent. So consistently make
Mm-hmm.
decisions based on that. But where you are and where your values are, sometimes there's a discrepancy, and that's where
Mm-hmm.
congruence comes into play.
Yeah, and that's the part as a like in the Western world especially, that's the part that we tend to forget the most is that congruence part. And so it's really learning to honor that part, because then, once you have those, then you have the inner alignment and the outer alignment, which is I think what a lot of us crave in our day to day and in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like a delicate balance to not compromise either or, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I can see on one end where you get too caught up in like I feel lazy today. I feel tired today. So I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
And then you live
Yeah.
out of integrity for weeks at end.
Mhm.
But then also I could see where you try to live too much in integrity and then you neglect yourself. And I think Stephen Covey talks about, don't destroy the golden goose that lays the golden eggs, right? Like you can't destroy yourself um,
Yeah.
for the sake of producing some golden eggs. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's where I find them both to be. It's just like so important to check in with both.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
It's a really I've heard people, and I feel like this is kind of what you're getting at of like congruence, realizing where you are right now, and then choosing to accept that and love that, and
Mhm.
then from that kind of foundation of it, you can show up in integrity.
Yeah.
Which I think there's
Mhm.
also a point to be made. You talked about productivity in the Western world, and that's like living in integrity for a lot of us, being productive.
Mhm.
Um, and you can adopt that, you can not adopt that, whatever it may be. But some of
Yeah.
us aren't aware of the fact that it is a conditioning, that it's not something we've
Mhm.
chosen to adopt, but we've been conditioned. We've created
Mhm.
that limiting belief of like productivity over effectiveness. If you were simply more effective, you would have more time to focus on your congruence, right? So maybe you're too stuck on productivity trying to fill your schedule that you miss the effectiveness of life. And that could be some conditioning, some dogma, some limiting belief that you have. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess the
Yeah.
question is, how do you know when your values are in integrity? So we talked about being in integrity is based on values, but how do you know when your values are in integrity with who you are and who you want to be?
Yeah. My biggest question that I come back to with that is asking like whose voice is telling me this?
Hmm.
Whose voice is telling me that productivity is my value?
Yeah.
Who's telling me that productivity is what makes me worthy?
Yeah.
And just noticing what that voice is, noticing when did that voice start can also be a really beautiful question. Um, and then, yeah, evaluating. That's where I think, we can have, I don't think our values are necessarily the same over a lifespan. And I know different people have different opinions on that. I think our values change. Um, because our values can be conditioning, and that's where we can choose new values, we can choose um, to start aligning with new values, but to question our current values or what may become old values, I tend to start with that question of like, whose voice is telling me this? How old is this voice? um, and does this voice align? Does this feel good? Does this not feel good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, we talked a lot about the inner work. Let's go ahead and jump into your dreams and goals now. What's your vision
Yeah.
for your company and your life?
Oh my gosh, this is such a big question. um, so currently I'm in grad school, so I feel like I've set aside a lot of like, I don't know, typically, at the beginning of the year, I do like to start with a set of goals for my business and, monetary goals and other types of goals. So for the moment, a lot of those things have been set to the side. But as I was sitting with this question, the first one is to publish a book, and that's something I'm doing next month. My first book, and it's self-published. Live Your Freedom Now. That's coming out, and that's been a big one for me. Um, that's been in progress for about a year and a half now, which feels really beautiful and exciting. Another dream that I have is I do hope to get my PhD. How I'm going to do that is, I got to start with the master's degree first, and then we'll move forward from there. And then I would also love to get my research published. So I do, like I've said before, I really love learning and exploring and understanding other folks' motivations and what cause us to even have those motivations. So I would love to kind of hone in a research area that I can explore, um, and one day have that research published. So yeah, those are kind of the three goals that came up for me. And they're not just business oriented, but to me, they're all connected to my business as well.
I gotcha. I gotcha. So get a master's degree and a PhD, get your research published, and publish your book, which is happening next month.
Currently, yeah, actively happening.
I gotcha. I gotcha. And it's Live Your Freedom Now. So tell us about the book and just give us like a brief overview of it.
Yeah, so I have the first my print copy here, um, that I'm so excited about. So essentially, the book is kind of reading from the cover. It's a practical framework and collection of short essays on how to live free. So throughout the book, I first evaluate what freedom is not, and then I look at what freedom is. offering kind of short essays on each of those things. And then at the end of the book, I go into my 5 practices of freedom, which include playful curiosity, non judgment, and awareness. Um, need to remember my own framework here: self trust, integrity and congruence, and then resilience. And so at the end of the book is kind of where I practically show you how to evaluate your conditioning, evaluate your dominant dogma to step into living your freedom in the present, kind of no matter what's going on around in the world. Because we live in a pretty chaotic world these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And any other dreams or goals that you want to list off here before we move on?
Oh gosh, just on the fun side of things, because I mentioned hiking, I would love to I would love to eventually hike a mountain in the sense of like a larger mountain. I think that would be really fun. I find a lot of joy when I have the opportunity just to be up in the mountains, but I've never really hiked, from the ground up to the tip top of a decent like mountain. So
What is
that's
decent
definitely a
size
goal.
for you?
I don't actually know the answer to that. I have no idea. I think I'll have to just find out as I go.
Does it have to be like the 10,000 footers in Colorado? Does it need to be a 14,000?
I mean, 10,000 is probably a good start. We'll go with that.
I gotcha. I gotcha. There we go. Well, awesome. What are the top 1 to 2 skills that you need to develop right now to make these dreams and goals come true?
Yeah, I really loved this question when I was sitting with it. So I wrote down 3. The first one is resilience.
You only get 2, so no,
I
I'm just
only
kidding.
get 2.
I'm
Come
just
on.
kidding.
The first one is resilience. I feel like that's a skill that just to me feels relevant throughout every aspect of life. And for me, resilience, I talked about productivity earlier. To me, resilience doesn't mean hustling, it doesn't mean productivity necessarily. It more so means honoring, it means being present for myself and showing up for myself, whatever that looks like each day. Sometimes that is doing, sometimes that is being. So that's that skill. The next one is patience. Um, as someone who does tend to dream big and that is, I don't know, what you would consider a high achiever, I'm trying to do the best with what I have access to. Um, Patience can feel really hard sometimes. I want things to happen faster. I would like my healing to happen faster. I would like my business to grow faster. I'd like grad school to move fast. There's all of these things, right? And so just being patient, again, kind of that being instead of doing mentality. Um, and then currently, one of the things that has been showing up for me, oh gosh, there might be 4 actually. These 2 are contrasting. Softness and fierceness. So on one hand, softness to me feels very present in that in my journey and my experience in life, I have had to, and like many of us have to, I've had to show up as hyper competent. I've had to show up as very productive in order to succeed, in order to, have a relatively normal life in the world that we're living in. And so for me, softness is actually giving myself permission to not have to always be hyper vigilant and hyper competent. And then on the other side of that is fierceness. And so for me, that is like, it's really just allowing myself to embody all of myself. Um, Fierceness in the sense of using my voice and feeling confident to use my voice. Um, Again, in the world that we live in today, a lot of times when we see especially a woman using her voice, it can be on one hand it can be kind of more on the masculine side, and that's like again that hypervigilance, hypercompetence, having to show up in the workplace in a more masculine way in order to succeed. And this fierceness to me is really embodying a more I don't love the terms masculine and feminine always because I think that can be very binary. But embodying a more feminine fierceness, like the kind of lioness, I suppose, and learning to feel confident in my voice in that way, not always having to be rigid and Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does. It does make sense. I'm gonna dig in a little bit if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
First, let's start with fierceness.
Yeah.
Where do you feel like you want to be more fierce in life, but you are not letting yourself?
Yeah. I think a perfect example is how, and I'm sure people will notice this in um, the podcast episode, how I keep asking, does that make sense?
Mhm.
I know that that's often conditioning, especially as women, to ask that question, and as a neurodivergent person, because sometimes my brain organizes information differently. Um, and for me, that fierceness means using my voice in a way that is just more confident, like this is who I am and this is already good. um so to me, that's what a lot of that fierceness is, and just like taking up my rightful space in the world, which again, ironically, that's what my book is about. That's what a lot of my work is. We tend to teach exactly what we need to hear, right?
Yeah,
And so yeah, that's what that fierceness is.
I gotcha. I gotcha. So it's more popping up in like kind of the little subconscious ways in your life than a big glaring area that you need to tackle.
Correct, yeah.
I gotcha. Yeah. It's catching the way your language reinforces past conditioning that you're trying to get through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like there are a lot of limiting beliefs around money that I have from growing up.
Yeah.
And one of the most recent ones that I realized is that my parents, it was like painful for us to spend money, right?
Mm.
And because it was painful for us to spend money, that's how I kind of interpreted spending money. It's painful. And that's why everybody around me was trying to save money because it was painful to spend money because it hurt to lose money. And obviously that's rooted in the fact that money is scarce. But where I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize this was manifesting was every time I had to spend money, I would get a little upset. Like, I'm like, I don't want to spend money. Like, I don't want to spend money
Yeah.
and stuff. But B, I didn't want to charge people for things because it hurt me to spend money. And I, seeing myself as a good person, I do not want to hurt other
Mm-hmm.
people. So if it hurts me to spend money and I'm projecting that belief onto others, clearly it hurts them to spend money. So if I charge them, I'm hurting them.
Yeah, yeah.
Which
Well,
was,
and what's interesting in that too is like there's also this story about what it means to be a good person
uh-huh.
in there. It's from like what I was hearing. There's like, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just catching my language around like, you know, judging myself, even the good person story. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm a good person only when I don't hurt people, like, that type of stuff isn't unconditional love towards yourself. Like, that's not showing
Yeah.
yourself unconditional love, but also the like, anytime I'm like, "Ooh, I don't wanna buy that because it costs too much." Even that's
Mm-hmm.
like, why you letting that, like, and it happens so quick, you know? And so those little
Totally.
things are much bigger. Like, I call them little things, but they're really actually huge.
They're
Humongous.
telling us a lot. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like kind of that unconscious story, right? Our unconscious is always trying to point things out to us, and we're like oblivious most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Those little things are. There's a lot attached to them.
Awesome. Well, I love that we got to dive a little bit into fierceness. Let's go to
Mm.
patience. What do you think is the root of impatience, both for yourself and then just for people in general?
The root of or the root, yeah, the root of impatience. Mm. I think that it's of course rooted in conditioning as well. The I think it's more so the belief that I'm supposed to be somewhere else,
Mm,
that where
yep.
I'm at is not enough.
Hmm.
So then there's an impatience to get there. However, we're never really there unless we embrace patience.
Yeah.
And enoughness. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel that. I would
Mm.
agree. I would agree that patience is just like, you know, us not appreciating the present moment and like what we have as
Yes.
what it is. 'Cause I was reading The Power of Now and he was talking about like patience is such a weird thing because it's always like waiting for something that's not here. And
Hmm.
so it's like it's a really good kind of trait to have, but it's also kind of counterintuitive to how, you know, I feel like our most first off, everything happens in the present moment. And so
Yes.
when you're waiting for something that's not here now, it's like it's
Mhm.
kind of contradictory to like how things work almost. And so
Yeah.
while it's an important thing to have, it's also a weird thing to put your finger on because um, I feel like true patience comes from not having to be patient because you're not waiting for anything, right?
Mhm.
And you're
Mhm.
just
It's
okay.
there's so much of holding the both and I feel like with that.
Hmm.
It's yeah, being fully in the present. And also, it's okay to believe that things are going to change.
Yes.
Like, yeah, yeah. There's a quote, and I put this in the book too, because that's kind of what like the live your freedom now concept is for me. Is it's like, how can I? Yes, of course, I want to work towards more freedom for myself, for others, for the planet, forever. Like that's the goal, right? And how can I find that for myself right here and now? Like if I can't find it for myself now, I'm never going to experience it. And there's a quote, I love it. Hold on, let me find it. It's one of my favorites. Um,
You just know what page it's
it's
on?
I don't know what page it's on, but I know I can find it. It's in
Gotcha,
one of
gotcha.
the. Here it is. The only place where we can exercise our freedom of choice is in the present, and that's
Mm,
Dr. Edith Eger. It's one of my favorite quotes because it just draws you back to the present. It's like, okay, the only place that I actually have choice, the only place I actually get to experience the freedom of choice is right here.
yeah,
That's it. That's what I have. That's what I have access to. Um, yeah, patience.
yeah, 100%. Well, there we go.
Yeah,
Cool. Well, we're going to jump on to the next question, which
sounds
is
good.
what are the highest impact daily actions that are going to tick the needle forward towards your dreams and goals?
Yeah, so this one, I think it sounds kind of boring. There's a lot attached to it, so feel free to ask questions. But what I came to is just really taking care of myself.
Yeah,
Um, for me, I do have a very active brain and I'm always doing things. And so the key for me to actually, tick the needle forward towards my dreams tends to actually be slowing down. It's taking care of myself. It's making sure those practical things of eating well, making sure I hydrate, making sure I go for a walk. Those are the things that I think are actually the most important because they're the first things to kind of get thrown out
yeah,
because they're, frivolous or whatever. At least those are the stories, right? Those are the stories in my head.
yeah, 100%. I honestly don't think it needs any further questions. I think that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's just like if you don't take care of yourself, again,
Hmm.
maintaining the golden goose that produces the golden eggs, right? Like,
Yes.
got to
Which
take
is
care.
really sad that like those foundational things that are like the core of our existence, like eating and like drinking water, like those are the things that are the most important to write down because they tend to get ignored. So,
Yeah, yeah. Recently, we started doing this thing 75 hard, and we have to drink a gallon of water a day. And
yeah.
it's been good for me because before I was doing this challenge, I wouldn't drink any water until probably about 2 or 3 p.m. And the reason I would drink water is because 2 or 3 p.m. would roll around. I'd be like, my head really hurts. I'd be like,
Mm,
why does my head hurt? And then I'd go through what I did that day, and I'm like, I haven't had any water. Let me go have some water. And then I'll drink
yeah.
water, and my head won't hurt anymore.
Totally. I feel you on that. Yep.
Yeah, and
It's a
so
got my water right here.
exactly, just the
uh,
real simple things that we'll neglect though, and neglect ourselves because we think we're doing something else that is more important, which,
mhm.
maybe you are doing something really pressing that day, but most likely that cold call I needed to make was not more important than me getting a sip of water. So,
Yep. At the end of the day, we're all still functioning mammals. Like we still need the same things.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
uh,
Well, let's go ahead and jump to the next one. What character trait do you most need to develop right now to make your dream life come true?
we've already touched on this one.
Mhm.
Presence. Yep.
There we go.
Presence.
And if there were one or two people you can meet right now, this could be a specific person or a type of person, and they'd really help you take that next step towards your dreams and goals. Who would they be and how would they help you?
Yeah. So this one was fascinating for me to think about. because I was trying to come up with a like specific person. And I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I really try not to idolize any person because we're all people. And at the same time, I think I'm actually really surrounded by a lot of the people that I already need to be. So currently, I'm attending Pacifica Graduate Institute studying counseling psychology. And I am surrounded by some of the most brilliant people. And I'm so honored to be there. They challenge me so much, the way they think. There's a lot of even the fellow students that I'm in class with, to be able to talk and engage with all of these people who are also curious, like just deeply curious about how our minds work and how we engage with the world, is so stimulating for me, and it's so life-giving. um, and I think for me, those are the people that I want to be surrounded by to help me follow my dreams, and so that I can support other people. So yeah, I think I'm already meeting them on a regular basis.
Yeah, yeah. So just people at what was it, Pacifica
Pacifica Graduate Institute, yeah.
graduate. There we go.
Super cool
Awesome.
place.
Is there anybody there that you need to cultivate a deeper relationship with that maybe we can get more
Mm,
specific within the institute?
yeah. I know something that I'm really challenging myself to do is to make sure that I ask questions and just ask to discuss things with different professors as I have them. So sometimes when we come to that like fierceness thing, right? Sometimes I can be a little bit shy in asking questions, or wanting to discuss things. And so really challenging myself. Each quarter we get some different professors and they're all so brilliant. And so for me, I think it's just challenging myself to ask questions, to be in discussion with those professors as I have them and as I have access to them. And then also with my fellow students, and I think this is kind of a challenge for all of us, and this I think will probably come up later as well. um, Asking my fellow students for support, letting them know when I'm struggling, would also be something that I feel like I need to engage in more, um, because it cultivates that deeper relationship and helps me learn more about myself and about the other students that I'm with. And like, yeah, yeah. Does that answer that question?
Yeah,
It
that's
kind
great.
of, yeah,
Love it. Love it. Well, now we're gonna jump into our thriving three. These are
yeah. This is fun.
yeah, these are a bit quicker questions. What's your favorite book, movie, or podcast? Pick one of them.
Mm. Okay, I'm gonna pick the most fun. I'm currently obsessed, and it's probably weird, but whatever. The Matilda musical movie that's on
Yeah.
Netflix now.
Okay, okay.
I'm a big fan. I feel like it really represents. So, part of my education is studying depth psychology, which is like Jungian and Freudian. And Jungian is very, dream oriented as well, and unconscious. And to me, the Matilda musical, the way it's written, is so fantastical and dreamlike. And I think that there's just a lot that it has to offer. So I'm a little obsessed. It's
There we
fun.
go. I'll have to go watch it. I haven't seen it.
You have to look at it from a fantastical perspective. And I like to think of the characters as different aspects of my psyche, so that can be a
Mhm.
fun way to look at it.
I guess first I'll need to go read some, what's his name? Jungian psychology?
Carl Jung, yeah.
Carl.
That
I see. I see.
Oh, that's gonna be a lot, yeah.
No, I'm not reading any Carl Jung. I,
He's intense to read.
I was a psychology major, so I'm sure I read him at some point because I
Mhm.
kind of knew who you were talking about, but I don't remember anything about him. So very fair. What is one way you like to take care of yourself?
Rest, hike, and then I also really love to just sing around my house. I find that to be a great way to just take up space and, yeah, get
What do
things out.
you sing? What's your favorite song to sing?
Um, well, because I'm obsessed with the Matilda musical, I've been enjoying singing that. There's different songs in that. I am very into musicals in general. I find them just the storylines and such, I find them fun. So I have just a playlist that I like to sing to. No specific one song at this point in time, but yeah.
Will you sing 15 seconds of a song for us right now?
Absolutely not. No way. There's no chance. I
Because
love that you asked that question though.
I was 95% sure you were gonna say no, but I was like, on the 5% part that she says yes, it would be epic.
Oh my gosh. That would be something, that's for sure.
Awesome. Well,
Uh,
what's one action step? Or I guess a better question is, because an action step that you can take right now to meet the people you need to meet is usually what I ask here. But what are some
hmm,
questions that you could ask either your colleagues or professors to kind of build that relationship a little further?
hmm. Wow,
I feel
that's a
like
good
I
question.
feel like it's too easy for you to just go and meet them because they're right there. So let's
Yeah.
do a little bit with them.
Can you repeat the question one more time? I need to like simmer on that one.
Yeah, what are some questions you can ask either your colleagues or your professors to deepen that relationship with them? Um, you know,
Hmm.
both grow together.
Wow, that's a fascinating question, and I don't feel like I have an answer.
Totally fair if you don't. We can just move on past it because it wasn't in the
It's not on the list. Yeah, you're throwing
yeah.
me a curveball. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is very like it's not necessarily like to build the relationship, but it's just one that I'm pursuing right now. So I had a dream this past week, and it has a snake in it, and so um, I'm kind of just doing research and noticing my associations with snakes and what it might mean in the dream for me and what's going on in my psyche and in my world. And I feel like I would be curious with some of my professors, like what they what their interpretation of a snake in a dream might be. And so for me, a lot of my dreams right now are kind of centered around like mother energies. I'm working through a lot of mother stuff, mother narratives. So I would be curious, like, what their experience is with people who are currently working through a lot of narratives around the mother. Yeah.
Mhm. I got you. Are you about to be a mom?
No, nope, not yet.
Oh,
It's more so just like my past and my
I
childhood
got you. I got you.
navigating. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
No,
got
not currently. No.
you. There we go. Well, cool, cool. Are you gonna ask them this
Cool.
week? Like tomorrow, I guess.
Well, we're on break right now, so
Oh,
probably
spring
not.
break.
Yes.
I see.
Yeah, we're
I
on
see.
spring break, so which is
I
very
got you.
nice.
So Monday then.
Well, we actually have like a month off, which is great. So
You have a month off.
got a whole month off. Yeah.
I got you. I got you. Well,
It's
if
a
you
it's a
remember,
good it's a good time. Yeah. It's a good time though cuz I'm working on the launch of my book. I've got enough on my plate. So it's like
yes.
perfect. Going to fit this in during this month before I then start everything up again and practicum and all kinds of things. So,
Yeah. Dang, that's epic. A month off.
mhm.
Well, cool, cool. We got about 8 minutes left, so we're gonna run through
Yeah.
this last section of the show.
Sounds good. I'm here for it.
These can get a bit more personal. So if you want to
Mhm.
pass on any of them, just be like, I'm a pass. I'll be like, okay, cool.
Sounds
What
good.
is one limiting belief that continues to pop up in your life, if any?
I am alone in this.
Mm. And where does that come from?
It comes from hypercompetence from growing up and living in our Western capitalist culture. I'm just reading my answers because
I got you.
trying to go fast. So,
I got you. So hyperconfidence and then Western capitalist culture.
yeah.
I got you. Do you have any actions that reinforce it? And do you need me to explain that question or does it make sense?
Um, no, I think it makes sense.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I think what actions reinforce it. So it's just like what is causing me to continue, right?
Yeah, it's
In
like you
that
have the
pattern.
belief and then you act on it, and those actions like tell you again that you are alone in this type of vibe.
Yeah, I think my own inner drive can really reinforce that,
I
pushing
got you.
myself too hard, holding myself to a standard that maybe is, probably conditioning in itself. And trying to think of any other actions. I think something else that comes up is like if there is a situation where I am rejected or where I feel potentially misunderstood, I use that and I can make up a story about that to say that I'm alone in this, when oftentimes that is just a story and I can keep leaning in. Um, and or it's okay to be rejected sometimes. and I can find somewhere else to be. It
Mm,
doesn't have to be a story.
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So rejection. I got you. Or your reaction to rejection, rather.
Yeah, correct. Like, am I taking that as,
Personal.
yeah.
I got you. If you were to change that "I'm alone in this" belief into an abundant phrase that really spoke to your heart, what would that phrase be?
Yeah, I think I'd have to play with this a little bit more. But I wrote down, I am supported by community on every side.
Mm, what does every side mean to you?
I think to me, it just means like all facets of my life. So it's like I am supported by community in my business. I am supported by community in my inner personal healing journey. I'm, supported by community in, I don't know, my family life. So like I just kind of envision it and like coming from all directions. Yeah.
And is that all being supported from one community, or like different communities are supporting you?
Yeah, some like different communities, different people. I also feel like I almost imagine it as coming up from underneath as like ancestors as well.
I got you.
Um, yeah, and then of course, if you want to integrate like a higher power, like it's really just like this. I had a good time kind of envisioning this for myself, so I really appreciated this question.
There we go. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad. I'm glad. That's really cool. The ancestors part. Never thought about.
Yeah,
And yeah, that's really cool.
it
Well,
felt meaningful for me as well.
when limiting beliefs start to take over, so you start to think I'm alone in this, what thoughts or actions do you resort to in order to kind of take back control, refocus yourself?
Yeah, so I wrote down the first and foremost, I seek to kind of center myself through meditation, and by getting in the dirt, lying on the ground, if that's possible. I think even the way that my mind put together that image of being supported is like, again, it's like noticing myself and centering myself and recognizing, coming up with some type of an image that supports me. That's the first action that I resort to kind of take back control and remember myself. And then additionally, I reach out for help from a friend, coach, therapist. Um, I think doing this inner work and learning to take responsibility for ourselves is really important. I think it's also crucial to ask for help because people can see things that we're not always aware of. And like I can recognize a lot of the inner dialogue in the stories now, and also a lot of other, like my coach and my therapist and my friends can see things that I sometimes can't. And so I think it's really important to me to take the action to ask other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got one last question for you. And it's actually not going to be the question that's on the sheet.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I've kind of ixnayed on that question just because the answer started getting redundant, but I haven't taken it off yet.
Sounds
So
good.
the question instead will be, what is your favorite belief about yourself?
Hmm. Favorite belief about myself. Hmm. It's an interesting question. What's coming up for me is that I believe I am a problem solver,
Mm,
like a creative problem solver. I would say that's probably just one of my favorite things about myself because it really allows me to, no matter what is coming at me, I am a creative problem solver. Everything's just a creative problem that I can play with and explore and figure it out.
there
Yeah.
we go. Well, awesome. Megan, that's all we got for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was really fun. So I really
Of
appreciate
course. Yeah, it was
it.
great. Thanks for coming on the show. And is there anything else you want to chat about before we sign off?
No, this was incredible. I feel like we covered so much, just beautiful space. And yeah, I really appreciate all the questions that you had. And yeah, I hope it's supportive for your audience. And yeah, that's it.
For sure. There we go. Well, if you guys are listening to this and you loved what Megan had to say, make sure to hit her up. Be on the lookout for her book that's coming out in the next month. All the links
Mhm.
to find her and find the book will be down in the show notes. Thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you on the next one. And on that note, we're out.